Welcome back. It's time for a new video. I'm a bit late to the party, but another glorious day in the core has started to become prioritized in my queue lately. So I figured one thing that was missing from my painting tutorials are the colonial marines. So Crow here is going to act as the first demonstration. And to start off with, when you assemble these guys, you should always stick to plastic glue. I know a lot of people are debating to use super glue, but on the Marines in particular, it doesn't matter probably because they have not so many joints that are going to be glued. They are large pieces with a big contact area between the different parts. So I guess it doesn't matter that much of the Marines, but since you're going to be fiddling around with the tails of the aliens, you might as well use plastic glue for all the miniatures in the line. Because the thing about plastic glue compared to super glue is that it actually melts the plastics and fuses them together, creating a much stronger bond than super glue does. And super glue has also one bad feature about it is that it's brittle. If it gets shocked in any way, if you drop the model or if you just bump it into something with great force, parts are going to fall off, and you don't want that. So that's why super glue is inferior in this case to plastic glue. The only thing that is good at actually is that it fuses the parts very fast. So if you're looking to get some easy short-term gains, well, go ahead and use a super glue. But if you want the long-term durability and you don't want to repaint and re-glue parts, go with plastic glue. It's your best bet. And I have two different versions here. I'm gonna empty this bottle first. This is my the one I used to go to, but I've heard so many people giving tips on the Tamiya's extra thin cement, and the big thing about it is the brush on glue. There's a brush in the lid here that you can brush on the small areas you want to glue, so you don't have this excess glue running around everywhere that can be a problem. And also with the more traditional types with the plastic glue, it clogs up the tube here very often, so you have to use a lighter to just heat it up and get rid of it. And the way I usually do it is to just take it off. This one, you see, have a lot of glue stick on it, and use something safe to hold it while you're burning it. And yeah, so then you just go. You can clearly see when the larger parts are catching fire, and then just dip it in some water and clean it up with some paper towels and do some careful squishing with only the air from the glue bottle, just to get rid of the moist that's stuck in the pipe. And then the glue should be running as smoothly as it was brand new. So step one is gonna be coating it with Corvus Black spray. Next up, I'm gonna be applying some Karak stone to be the basics for the battle dress uniform. And yeah, let's get going. So it's mostly the arms and legs. That's the only places that shows off the B.D.U. I'm doing the famous two thin coats. You can see that the pants, it's very thin there, so it's going to be one more layer applied. And of course, why you would do that is to keep the details of the sculpt of the mold sharp. And I have a lot of respect for painting these figures, so figure I'm gonna do it right, as best as I can at least. At least try to avoid some rookie mistakes. I'm not planning on having these made like into masterpieces, but I'm gonna try to have them at least done properly with the methods I'm using. I can't speak much of the finished product because, as you all know or should know by now, I'm not the best painter, but I want to play with painted miniatures, so this is how you do it. You just got to grab a brush and start painting. There's no easy way out. It's not as bad though as when I was painting the Predator cast with Arnold Schwarzenegger. That was the worst. My nerves were all over the place during that time. And the way I painted the Marines in the AvP game is actually the same way as I painted the camo on the Dutch squad in AvP. So if you want one more video about camo, you can watch that one. One of the bigger issues when painting camo on such small miniatures is the scale is never going to look good. If you try to do the smallest tiny patterns of camouflage, you are going to end up with a very messy model. But you also don't want the patterns too large because it doesn't look good. So you need to find like a good balance in between for the patterns. So let's see how I will go about that this time. I know from experience the last time I painted the tutorial for the camo, I was using a brush that was too large to perform shapes that were satisfying with the camouflage. So this time around, when we get to that part, I'm gonna have the smallest brush I can find in my collection. And impatient as I am, I'm not actually letting this dry before applying the second coat. I'm more or less such a slow painter, so I go over the old areas again. It might not be perfectly dry, and I would urge you to let that dry in between, but I am impatient. Time to let it dry before base coating the armor parts. Next up, I'm doing some Caliban Green for the armor parts. switching brushes now to a smaller one for the weapon and the thin strap that holds the leg armor in place. This might not look like the correct green when you start applying it, but it's just a base coat, and when all the details are going on, I just want the basic color of the armor to be something that stands out from the other colors I'm going to apply to it. So it doesn't just all look the same, the uniform and the armor. And it's the same thing I'm gonna do on the pulse rifle as well. Kind of like I did on the dropship, I'm gonna base it in Caliban Green and then go over it with Castellan Green to get the green color that more resembles the end result. Let's see if I can remember the correct areas to paint from the top of my head. I'm just gonna have a quick dab of Bugman's Glow as a base coat for the face, and I'm gonna do that off camera. And here we have the hands and face base coated with Bugman's Glow. And the face is very tricky because on this side of the face you can't really tell where the armor starts and the face starts, so the sculpt isn't very clear. And on this side of the face you have this visor infrared thing. So if you wonder what the blocky blob in the middle of the face is, it's the visor. So I put some color on the hands and the face and also did some touch-ups on the armor. I'm gonna add some Castellan Green now to the uniform. Start making small shapes using a small brush. And I was trying to find some references for the B.D.Us, and that's a maze, a rabbit hole to jump down into, because just like the green colors of the vehicles, the brightness of the movies make the camo looks very different from photographs you see on the props. I saw some company that recreated the pattern, and it was a lot more green olive tones to the whole B.D.U than compared to what I think they look like on the screen. And also on the screen it looks very washed out. The colors have been muted from wear and tear. So that might also be why an original more olive and green hues have turned to basically grays and khaki all over the place. Like blacks washed out to grays and dark greens washed out to light greens. So I'm guessing my version is something in between. There aren't really a lot of greens present if you catch some stills from the movie. Actually, it mostly looks like desert camo with various browns. So I'm gonna have Castellan Green represent the more green tone that may not be actually present in the movies, at least not on the B.D.U. For the armor itself, though, you can clearly see when you compare it that it's a bit darker than the dress uniform, so that's why I'm basing the armor parts in a darker green to also make them different from start. So I think the model looks more interesting to have the areas broken up like this than, let's say, if I used Karak stone on the complete miniature and then made the same camo pattern all over. So I might not be totally movie accurate, but I think I'm hitting a good compromise between miniatures and the colors used and contrast, because you still recognize them as Colonial Marines, I think, in the end, even if there's slight variations to the colors. You want to have the shapes done clearly, and you don't want to go over them a few times with a brush because that might smear them out. So you need paint enough to do a good coverage, but not too much to smear it out. That's the first of the 3 colors I've chosen. Let's head on to the next one. Gonna be some Dryad bark. So I'm just gonna try to paint 2 or 3 directions for every field. So it isn't just one irregular line, but some kind of shape or form to it also. Just take your time and balance the distance between shapes and colors. It's hard to make patterns on the chest armor because there's so much other details like the buckles and fasteners and everything. So just try to break it out the best you can. Yeah, I think that's going to be it for the browns. And the final color I'm going to be applying is going to be Screaming Skull, but I think I'm actually going to... No, I'm going to apply that now as well. Okay, the smallest brush I can find with some Screaming Skull, and it's just some kind of off-white. Don't want to have it too sharply against the other colors. And I'm going to be very limited with this. I'm just gonna follow along some of the other lines with it and not create big patterns. This will not be a lot at all. Just a few streaks. I'm gonna shade over this later, so this white is going to be toned down along with the other ones even further. But the uniform has some kind of similar addition to the patterns like this white, so at least I figured I have to represent it in some way. It's subtle enough to not be in your face, because I was a bit skeptical to include such a bright feature to the armor and the fatigues. But I can see now it really helps to boost the appearance of the overall effect. And also on the armor I'm going to be even more restrictive about how much I apply, because it's going to clash even more there. Just need to have a good consistency of water into the mix here so it flows greatly. Yeah, that's enough with the whites. And for all the black parts I'm using Corvus Black. It's gonna be on the shoes and also on the shoulder lamp, the top parts. Corvus Black is a pretty interesting choice for painting blacks in general, because I think that if you want something to be really dark black, instead of highlighting it in some stages with like Eshin black, Eshin gray, or something even brighter, I think it might be cool to actually do the other way around and start with a bit brighter and then shade it with Nuln Oil. Let's see how that goes. And also parts of the rifle that's not metallic. Gonna get the same Corvus Black. And also for the shoes, they have a green or khaki or olive drab colored piece on the top sides of the shoes, at the sides of the lacing. So I used some, I think it was Tallarn Sand, a bit darker khaki color there, to separate it from the B.D.U Karak stone. Next up, I think we are going to paint some more accessories like buckles and holsters. I'll also include some Corvus Black as a camo pattern on the armor parts, at least the torso, and the fasteners, the buckles on the back here. I'm gonna make them black and then with worn metal. So I'm gonna add some black as camouflage areas to the helmet. And the camera is gonna get this color as well. There we are. Gonna check some references now for the holsters. As far as I can tell, the belts and holsters are the standard olive drab green dark variant, so I'm just gonna go with my usual recipe here with Caliban Green and Castellan Green. And finally the Castellan Green on the details, on the belts and the pouches and the tools. Now for some carefully applied metallic worn effects with a Leadbelcher. And I'm mostly thinking about the pulse rifle and some of the buckles. I have a very light touch here. Okay. Gonna focus a bit on the skin now, make it brighter. Kislev Flesh is the next one. I'm going to try to track the fingers and have the darker skin tone from the Bugman's glow only stay in the recesses. And don't overload your brush because this is tiny work. And when the skin meets like the sleeve, I try to leave a little half a millimeter of the darker skin tone so we get a contrast between the borders. So you just don't paint the brighter skin tone all the way up to the dark colors of the next area. Just leave a tiny piece of the darker tone to get some natural shading between borders. The face here is very tricky. I'm just gonna try to avoid the eye and have some drop shades to the work of the eye for me. This is not looking good. I'm gonna have the shades darken the parts as good as it can, because there was no point in trying to add detail to something that isn't there. We're getting ready for the wash stage now. So it's time to apply some washes. I'm going to start out with Agrax Earthshade across almost all the miniature. Dirty the marines up a bit. Gonna try not to get some of the wash on the hands and face. And I'm gonna dilute it a lot to try and have it a little bit on the hands. Yeah, the face is gonna be a mess. I'm not gonna cry about it too much on this particular model. We'll see on the other ones when there is more to actually paint. I'm gonna do the slightly diluted variant on the pulse rifle as well, on the greens at least. I think I'm gonna stick with Nuln Oil for the other parts of the gun. Okay, time to wait for it to dry. It's perfectly fine to play with this piece at this stage. You could go for some more highlighting, I guess, but this will do the job for the board game. Now I'm moving forwards to do some highlights on the gun and a few select armor pieces. And I'm using Loren Forest. So just trace the hard edges with the side of the brush. This is mainly going on the green parts that face upwards towards the sun or a light source above their heads. So just the very top edge of the belt as well. Okay, the only thing I'm not pleased about so far is the face on his left side, because it's so blocky and terrible looking. So I'm gonna try to shade it down and cheat a bit. See if we can stick some Reichland flesh shade in there to hide the gross parts around the mouths. Oops, that was too strong. Only the base left. The tiles for the game looks very gray and blue in the tones. So I'm gonna start with a heavy dry brush of, well, medium dry brush I guess, of Dark Reaper to catch that effect. I'm almost stippling the brush at times. It's the first time I try out these Masterclass AP dry brushes. They're a bit different feel to them, so I'm alternating between dry brushing and stippling to get where I want. Okay. Thinks that's a good basis laid down. Okay, in the middle some more. There we go. And for one lighter highlight to this Dark Reaper, I'm using Dawnstone. And this is gonna be a little bit more careful because I want this lighter tone to be present, but it cannot take over too much. All right. I think I'm gonna leave it at that and just do a Nuln Oil finish on both the base, the gun's shiny parts with metals, and call it done. Yeah. Just a quick Nuln Oil pass. Some on the gun. And the base. And also the boots, I guess, trying to avoid the olive patch on the top side there. Just darken it down a bit. I see I catched some of the tip of the boots with a dry brush, so okay. Time to let it dry and pick a color for the crow name tag on the base. It's gonna be an easy dry brush on the letters instead because I don't want it to be sharp but still readable. So I'm gonna catch some letters here. There we are. I think it's subtle enough, but still readable. Should work out fine.